Hi everybody, it's crazy, it's Monday, and it's time for the UPBGE video of the week. Now before I get started, gotta give a shout out to my trusted because you guys rock. To my crazy fam, I love you guys. Now, we left off last week on, let me see if I can get this right, page 20, and we left off with physics panel settings. Now I also opened up this file here. We'll get into that in just a minute. I just want you to be able to look at where we're at. I'm supposed to be here. Okay, just to let you know that we are not using this panel because the world panel does not have the physics in it anymore. The physics panel, or the scene panel, does. Okay, so let's continue on. So now that you're familiar with the world properties editor, or the scenes property editor, which contains settings that apply to all physics objects indiscriminately, let's take a look at the physics properties editor. Okay, so that is this little guy right here. I'm gonna bring that out just a little bit so that way you can see it. It's usually at the end of the line. Okay, it's right here, the physics property tab. Okay, from here you can alter the physics characteristics of individual objects. So this one does it for everything. This is all of it. Does all the physics. Okay, this sets up all the physics. Okay, this sets physics on each individual object in your scene. Okay, physics settings apply to all game object types, including mesh. Okay, any mesh. Okay, an empty, which I don't see one on here, lighting, or your lamps, and your camera. Okay. See, physics types. How do you decide which physics types to pick for an object? That largely depends on the role of the object in the game. Okay, so I'm gonna bring this table over here. Let me see if I can do it. Yeah, I did it right. Okay, so this table right here shows all the physics types that are available in Blender and their corresponding characteristics. Okay, so I'm just gonna read them off real quick. Oops. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna read them off real quick, and I'm gonna show you up here starting from no collision, which, as you can see, has no collision. It has no collision, isn't affected by force, gravity, or torque, and its role is only affects high resolution mesh. Okay, so you should only use it on that. Okay, next is static, and yes, it's affected by collision. As you can see, you can actually have Axure, Ghost, and all the neat stuff. We'll get deeper into that in a minute. Okay, but it is not affected by gravity, force, or torque. Okay, it's used for mainly buildings and immovable structures. Okay, your dynamic, okay, has collisions and is affected by gravity, force, and torque, but really doesn't have a role that is dedicated to. Okay. Then you've got your rigid body, which is affected by all. It is affected by collision, is affected by gravity, force, and torque, and has a specific role. It's mainly for like movable barrels, crates, and general objects, anything that can be moved. Okay. Then you've got soft body, okay, which is it's affected by gravity. It's affected by collision, but it does not. It's partly. Let me see if I can get that right. Okay, it has collision. It is not. It's partly affected by gravity, force, and torque, which means it kind of does, and it also has a dedicated role. It's mainly for hair, cloth, and rubber duckies. Okay, anything squishy. All right. Occluders. Okay, is not affected by collision, is not affected by gravity, force, or torque, and has really no walls, or really no rolls. It's for walls for performance optimization. I'll get into that later. Okay, sensor. Okay, sensor is affected by collision, but is not affected by gravity, force, or torque, and it really doesn't have a role. It's actually an event trigger. Okay, your navigation mesh. Okay, isn't affected by collision, doesn't have gravity, force, or torque, and really doesn't have a role because it is a path-finding helper. Okay, and then you've got your character. The character is affected by collision, is not affected by gravity, force, or torque, and doesn't really have a role. It's mainly designed specifically for characters. Okay, so that's what all these are affected. And we're going to go on down. Okay, collision is whether an object detects collision. Okay, that's what collision means. GTF, okay, whether the object can be moved by gravity, force, and torque. Okay, and its role, whether the objects roll and tumble when they are on an incline. Okay, so to familiarize yourself with the different physics types, open the demo file available from the book Chapter 6 Demo PhysicsTypes.blend. It shows some of the commonly physics types and their behavior. Okay, so you're going to come up here to open, and then you're going to scroll to or look for your wherever you have your game engine book. You're going to go to the files, you're going to go to the chapter, and you're going to go into demo. In that demo, you'll find all these cute little files to play with, and yep, physics types is right there. Okay, just click it, and this is what you shall see. All right, let's look at the settings in more detail. Okay, so let's come back to over here, and let's go on and hit no collision. Okay, no collision skips all the physics calculation. The objects will be effectively invisible to the physics engine. Other objects will not be able to detect collision with the object, nor collide with it. No collision objects can still be moved using the motion actuator. Use this for objects that you do not intend to interact with at all during the game, such as leaves of vegetation, grass, technically water you don't really collide with, but you might want to have that for it because of the fact you need some kind of collision on it, but we can go into that later. Okay, collision proxy. Okay, setting an object to no collision completely skips the collision detection on the object, which can speed up the game considerably on a high polygon mesh. Okay, high poly mesh will slow it down to a snail's crawl if you have collisions on it. Okay, a common practice is to set the high poly mesh to no collision, which I do on my projects, and then manually create a specified or simplified collision proxy mesh object that approximates the shape of the high polygon mesh. In other words, it basically fits around, like if you're going to use a building that's really high poly, like my courthouse is, you don't want the player or the physics to slow the whole game down because it's trying to show you every face and it's trying to calculate each face. You can actually just put a square block around it, a cube around it, and guess what? Now your character will run into it, but it's not running into the building, it's running into the collision proxy. Okay, which is basically what I do. Okay, then attach the high poly mesh to the collision proxy using parenting. This way, the low poly mesh will be used for all collision calculation, which is fast, and the high polygon version of the object will be used for display, which is visually nicer. Okay, make sense? Yeah. As this is an optimization technique, a step-by-step tutorial on creating a collision proxy is covered in Chapter 8. Okay, so keep that in mind to when we get to Chapter 8, this is going to be one of the things that we're going to be working on, okay? Your next up is static. Static objects are the default physics type for objects. They do not fall due to gravity, nor do they move by external impact, such as another object striking them. By default, the mesh itself is used as a collision mesh, which can be slow if the object has a lot of polygons. Static objects never move on collision with another object. Use this setting for objects that require collision but don't move, such as buildings and fixed structures. Okay? Let's move on to dynamic. Dynamic objects are different from static objects in that they have a defined mass and follow the basic Newtonian law of mass and acceleration. They fall due to gravity and react with other objects that they collide with. Okay. By default, the collision bound for dynamic objects is a sphere for performance reasons. Sometimes this is sufficient, but most of the time it's better to use another shape as the collision bound. More on collision bounds in Chapter 8. So keep that in mind. Chapter 8 is going to pop up a lot in this, okay? However, moreover, because dynamic objects do not roll, their usefulness is limited. If you want to simulate a realistic 3D object, rigid body is what you want, okay? All right, so next one is, guess what? Rigid body. Okay, rigid body behaves very similar to a dynamic object. They have a defined mass, accelerate due to gravity, and react to collisions. On top of that, rigid body objects have the ability to tumble when needed, whereas a dynamic object will slide awkwardly down a ramp without rotating. That's one reason why a lot of people went from a dynamic character to a rigid body character, because when you try to go up an incline, your character rolls back down, okay, or slides back down. With a rigid body, you can actually work it a little bit easier, okay? If the Suzy model in the aforementioned sample Blender file is set to rigid body, it will behave like a real object, fall towards the ground, and come to rest on one of its ears. Okay, so that would be this one right here. Oh, no, rigid body right here, okay? Avoid D-lock movement, okay? When using a dynamics-based object, dynamic, rigid body, and so on, you should use physics-based options, such as force and linear velocity for movement, and not change its location directly by D-lock, okay? What it's talking about is right here, okay? Instead of moving it by its location, okay? Let me see if I can bring that up just a hair, okay? You should use it by using force or torque or linear velocity. If you want to move your character forward, you should use linear velocity. Now here, as you see in this, they make the player character just use the lock, regular location. You really don't want to do that, because if you're using it as a rigid body, it's going to have issues when trying to do other things. Okay, you want to use either linear velocity or angular velocity. Okay. Okay, so yeah, I read all that. Okay, so now let's move on to soft body. Okay, soft body. Whereas all the previous described physics types operate on the objects by moving and rotating them around without changing the underlying geometry. Soft body physics uses a mass spring system to apply deformations to the actual geometry. With soft body, you can create convincing cloth and other soft objects. Although it is very cool to play around with, soft body is very computationally intensive compared to the other physics types, and not as stable. So use it sparingly. It's like if you're going to have hair, yeah, be aware. As seen on the Suzy model in the sample file, it will fall due to gravity. And once it hits the ground, it collapses as if it's made of a rubber shell. Let me try to reread that, right? This is the power of soft body physics. So basically, Suzy will become a very soft, spongy, like clothy texture. So when she, or not texture, but object, when she falls, she will hit this and just kind of slide down and, kind of like a cartoon character when they hit a wall. Same thing. Okay, Apple scale. The physics engine works more reliably when the objects have a scale of 1. Thus, it is highly recommended to apply scale. Did I say Apple scale? Yeah, I said Apple scale. It's supposed to be apply scale. Sorry about that. Apply scale by pressing Control A on most of the objects before you run the game. This will prevent a lot of the strange issues that might crop up later. And trust me, Alt A or Control A is your friend. Okay, Control A is your friend. Okay, now let's go to the occluder. Okay, occluder objects do not react to gravity and collision. It doesn't at all. Their only function is to make an object behind them invisible. Occluder objects are used to help the game engine decide when to remove objects from view to speed up the rendering performance. Strategically placed occluders can significantly increase the performance of the game. Okay, so you would use an occluder that if Suzy fell, she would actually, once she entered behind this, she would disappear and then come out here. So all the physics that are on her will be affected to here and then stop until it gets here, and then now it's there. So she will be considered invisible. Okay. All right. So see, there's a figure 116. Okay, so I'm gonna switch over to it real quick. Hang on, give me a second. Let's see, 8, 6. Yeah. So basically, an occluder will basically hide whatever it is behind it. Okay, so if you make something an occluder, it will hide whatever it is behind. Okay. All right, so finish up here. From left to right, the first image shows the scene setup of books, chapter 6, physics occluder.blend. Okay, so the second image, so let's go ahead and go to it. All right, so we got to go to chapter 6. So let's go back one. We're in chapter 6 now, and we're going to look for what? Physics occluder. Right here. Okay, so you're going to go into your chapter folder, and you're going to go in right down here, and it will say physics occluder.blend. We're going to open that. So as you see, this is your physics occluder. Okay, it will not see anything behind it. Okay, if I go to O and I hit P, okay, you'll see it there. Okay, so now let me go ahead and take this off and put it on solid. Okay, and then hit P again, and you will not see the Susie. It will not affect the physics or anything on it. Okay, it won't affect it at all. Okay, so that's the whole idea behind that, and that's what it's getting ready to explain. So let me just read on. Okay, so from left to right, the first image shows the scene set up. Okay, I just showed all that. Okay, the second image shows what the camera sees. Okay, so the camera will see the solid object here. Okay, it will only see this. It will not see the Susie at all. So if I hit 0 and then I hit play, you will not see it. It will not show Susie at all, and it will not have any physics compared to. Okay, so notice the monkey head is not visible because the plane is blocking it. The third image is the view from the camera while in-game in wireframe mode. Notice that even though the monkey head is behind the wall, it is still being rendered, thus wasting precious computing time. The last image in the game, in the same in-game view as the previous image, but with the wall set to occluder, the monkey head is not displayed. Okay, so you will not see it. Okay, right now that is that. So if I put it on occluder, okay, put it to wireframe and hit play, monkey head disappears. Okay, so anything behind it, okay, will not show up with it being an occluder. Okay, so now if I hit circle again, hit P, as you see, it affects the physics. As you see right there where it says shows physics, it's actually moving. Okay, now we put it back over to occluder one more time, and then hit play, and as you see, the physics is still there, but the physics is there, but it's not affecting, or it's not affecting it at all. Why isn't it working? Oh, because I got something else on there. Yeah, no. It's supposed to disappear. Anywho, let's continue on. Okay, notice that even though the monkey head is behind the wall, it is still being rendered, thus wasting the precious time. The last image, as we just said, okay, will not be displayed. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and go on here to go into sensor. Okay, similar to static object, a sensor object detects collision with another object. It is usually used as a replacement for the radar or near sensor, because a sensor object can be made into any arbitrary shape. Furthermore, sensors will detect collisions, but they do not register a response. In other words, they behave like ghost objects. Additional logic bricks are needed to utilize a sensor object effectively. Okay. Now we're going to go to nav mesh. Okay. This setting turns an object into a helper object that is used for pathfinding navigation. Since Blender 2.6, the game engine has a fully automated AI pathfinding routine. it can be used to direct an AI character through a 3D world, reaching a target while avoiding obstacles. Hands-on tutorial navigation. Okay, so now we're going to go to back to chapter 6. Okay, we're going to open it up and we're looking for nav blend. There it is. Okay, so this is your nav blend. Okay, this scene is set up for with 4 objects, excluding the lamp and camera. So it's got 4 objects in it: 1, 2, 3, and a nav mesh, which is 4. Okay. Monkey is our main character. It will be navigating through the maze, the visual mesh, to get to the target. To aid its quest, we have created a simple helper geometry that outlines where the character can walk. This object is known as the nav mesh. Figure 1, see, this will show the initial setup. Okay, so this is the initial setup. Okay, so we go to nav mesh for that one. And they have nothing really set up on it. It don't have collision groups in it, which has changed now. Okay, a navigation mesh is a helper object. Invisible while the game is running, this is used to help guide other objects along the path. The nav mesh object is a regular mesh object that defines the shape of the accessible area for the pathfinding routine. There are 2 ways to create a nav mesh. One is to manually model a geometry that covers all the areas that are accessible to a character. This is what we have done with nav mesh right here. Okay, that's that one. Okay, another option is to ask Blender to create a nav mesh automatically. It might be easier for larger maps, but the result is far less predictable. We will cover this function at the end of this hands-on tutorial. Make sure that the nav mesh object is selected and change its physics type to nav mesh, which is what I did up here. The nav mesh will turn into a colorful grid, but don't be alarmed. This is normal. Okay, right now it's not showing that. Okay, so it's not showing it because it's black and white, because it doesn't really have anything in there. Okay, so it means that the object now can be used to aid in navigation. Navigation meshes become invisible when the game is running. Select the monkey object, so we're going to go select the monkey, and add a steering logic brick. Okay, so we're going to add a steering, which is this little guy right here, actuator to it. Define the target and nav mesh object as shown in figure. So I'm just going to put it up here. Okay, so your target object is going to be the target. So we're going to find target. And your nav mesh is your nav mesh. Okay, they got it set to, bring that one up just a little bit so you can see the whole thing. Okay, and that is 1. Velocity is 3. So left all the rest of this as default, except for the turn speed. They turn to 1. Facing, okay. All right, so we're going to set this to 1. See what it does. Okay, that's your turn speed. And you're done. Start the game and watch the monkey seek out the cone. The steering actuator contains additional options that you can explore. So let's go ahead and hit play and see what happens. It does nothing. Oh, because, crazy. Look, you got to hook it up. All right, let's try it again. Now, as you notice, it just goes straight to it. It isn't blocked because this is static. It is not a visual. Shouldn't be able to go through that. Okay, that's odd. Anywho, okay, so normally you're supposed to see the finished game running in the Blender game engine. You can check out the NavMage finished blend, and let's see where we messed up. It might not work in UPBGE, but we're going to try it. we're going to go to the fish. See, this is what it should look like. And if you hit play on this, this is what it should do. Okay, so that's what it's supposed to do. That's all set up. Let's see. What's the difference between anything? That's all the same. Oh, it said cone, but that one said target. Okay, so we're not worried about that, and that was the nav mesh. So whatever you made the target, it should do it, but it just didn't. I don't know why. Okay, anywho, as promised, another way to create a nav mesh is to use the automatic generator. To do this, delete the nav mesh object first, so you can start with a clean slate. Okay, so if I click on that and I hit X, delete the nav mesh. Okay. All right, select the object you want to use as the guide in creating the nav mesh. In this case, you will need to select visual mesh. Blender will build a new nav mesh based upon it. Okay, so select the object you want, okay, to use as a guide in creating the nav mesh. In this case, you need to select visual mesh. Okay, so that's the visual mesh. Right? What's that named? Yeah, it's visual mesh. Okay. All right. Blender will build a new nav mesh. So if you take this and you put it to nav mesh. No? Oh, actually, that was static. Go to the scene tab, properties editor. You should see the build nav mesh button along with, okay, so we have to go to here, is what it's saying. Find the nav mesh. Okay, build navigation mesh. Okay, as you see, it doesn't do that great a job. Okay, we don't want that. Take it off that, put it as static. X, let's delete that one. Tab. Well, they don't have much into it, do they? So this is basically how you would do the nav mesh to get it to go around the whole thing, I guess. Okay. So then, now you would come over to here. You would come to nav mesh. Okay. Build nav mesh, and it still does the same. See, that's the reason why you shouldn't use build nav mesh unless you give it a nav mesh to work with. Okay. Pressing the aforementioned button will create a nav mesh automatically from the visual mesh. If the result isn't optimal, play with the settings. Agent radius is a good place to start. So let's go to agent radius. Where's that? Agent radius. I don't see it. Oh, probably because agent radius. Okay, so if you do that, oh. X. Okay, let's bring it up to 1. Let's see what happens. I'm curious. Boom. Nope, that didn't do nothing. Build that mesh. Nope. Static. Let's go back to this. Oops. Yeah, it makes the whole thing, so we don't want all that. So let's try 60. Let's do 70. Oops, not 70. 0.70. Okay, I'm getting too far into this. Let's just go ahead and have fun with it real quick. And select the mesh. Build that mesh. Okay. Maybe we have to go down. Let's go to 5 and see what happens. 5. Build that mesh. Yeah. Okay, so 0.20. Hit X. Let's get rid of that and let's click on that again. Yeah, okay, there you go. Okay, so you have to bring it down, not up. All right, I wish they would said that. Okay, so that's what that does. All right, so let's go back over here. We're not going to work with nav mesh right now. We're going to go to the next one, which is the last one, which is character. Okay, so let's click on the character. Let's make him character. There we go. Okay. All right, so this is a specialized physics type that is designed specifically for player-controlled characters. This physics type follows the basic rules of kinematics, while ignoring some of the other physics rules in order to make the object's behavior more predictable. For example, the character object type doesn't bounce off walls or slide on ramps. Physics type.blend has the example of the playable character object that shows walks around. Try to move it with the arrow key. So let's go ahead and go back over to here. We're going to go to which one? Physics types. That's in demo. That's in, okay, so remember that's in demo. And that's this one. And if you hit play, you can watch all the fun stuff. So that was all the fun stuff. Now you can move around with W, S, A, D. Okay, so as you walk around. Okay. Ta-da! Okay. This physics type follows the basic. Here's the command. I just read that. Okay, for example, okay, try to use and move the arrow keys. Okay, so that's where I'm going to end off today. You can play with this file, play with the other files that we said in the video here. You can see all the cool stuff, how each one works. Dynamic, stay still. The rigid body kind of just slides off. Soft body acts like something rubbery, and the occluder hides it as it passes through. Okay, we'll do it one more time. As you see, the occluder just made that one just disappear. Okay, and of course you got the player character that you can move around with. Okay, so that's all we got for today. Let me switch back over to here. So we ended on page 28, and we're going to leave off with common settings that you can use for your player character. We'll do that all next week. And that'll probably be short, but we'll probably just add a little bit more onto it because right now I'm up to 32 minutes. I did promise a bigger video because I felt like y'all needed a bigger video. And that one's a big one, and I wanted to make sure I got most of those in there. So, with that being said, page 28 next week. Common settings. See you next week.